So now, guys, we're gonna bring in Johnny, Klaus. Hello there, Johnny. Hello there, Ruth, James,
Yeah.
and Harriet. So a lot more people just suddenly showed up. Thank you guys for attending. How are we all?
All good.
Yeah, good, thank
All
you.
Excellent.
good. Fabulous, fabulous. So we'll have a few more people joining, but just like to give you guys an intro, again, our audience a little intro of what's going on as well. We are doing a RegTech roundtable on the topic of screening. We just had Napier AI and a few other screening providers on for the first panel. They talked about all how they get data, the watch list, the sanctions list, adverse media, the price points, the difference points of all of that. But here we have a list and collection of vendors who actually add these tools to their platform as well. You guys have tons of experience individually, so in this sector. So what I'd like to do is just go through the room, get everybody to introduce themselves. Why don't we start with Johnny? You showed up first, so Johnny, and then Klaus, and then Ruth, and then James, and I'll shout your names. But yeah, go ahead, Johnny.
Hi there, Arslan. Nice to see you. It's been a while. Hi, I'm Johnny Davis. So I'm in charge of sales and channel here at Xenu. Bit of briefly on the business. Our background is in white label. We're a predominantly tech-driven business. Our role is to orchestrate and deliver a full compliance ecosystem to our partners and customers. And yeah, delighted to be joining here today. Thank you for inviting me.
Klaus, love to hear from you. Klaus, are you there? He's a bit still for me, so Ruth, we'll go with you until Klaus returns.
Sure. Thank you for having me today, and hi everyone on the panel. So my name is Ruth Mittelman Cohen, and I'm the head of legal compliance at VinciWorks. So I lead our work with UK and global law firms. VinciWorks is a global leader in anti-money laundering training and compliance solutions, and we have onboarding software, as you said, that integrates with lots of other pieces of software as well. And it's nice to be here with everyone.
Thank you. Good to see you, Ruth, and I hope you, family, everybody's doing well. We'll talk on that
Thank
separately. Klaus, love to hear from you. How you been, and tell us about you.
I'm very well. It's busy time these days, as I think that's for everybody. Technology is accelerating so much, and things are moving so fast these days that it's that's interesting to stay in touch with all the new developments. So my name is Klaus Christensen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Know Your Customer Limited. We're a Hong Kong headquartered company, but we're worldwide active. We concentrate on the business verification, so KYB rather than KYC. And we have a global leader in live registry connections as a data source for the whole system to decide on onboarding specifically. We work with a lot of large banks like DBS and Standard Chartered, especially in Asia, but also in Europe and beyond.
Thank you for that. And sorry, James, would you like to go next? Tell us about Diligencia yourself as well.
Yeah, Arslan, thanks for inviting me to join the panel, and it's great to meet the other panelists and looking forward to the discussion. I'm James Redfern. I'm the Director of Sales here at Diligencia, based in the UK. For reasons that will become obvious when I explain what we do, we're kind of busy. We at Diligencia provide due diligence and corporate intelligence services across organizations and people in the Middle East and Africa. And we supply these to corporates, financial services, law firms, public sector, etc. So we've got a broad range of clients who use our services. We're predominantly, you can look at us as predominantly a data supplier. The perspective I want to bring to this discussion is very much one of a regional specialist that works in emerging and challenging jurisdictions. And the premise that I'm going to probably repeat repeatedly through the conversation is the need for accurate information and context around, understanding who your client is, because no screening solution is going to be any good if you start with the wrong sort of core information. But that's it. I've been in this business for longer than I care to remember.
Thank you for that. And then Harriet, would you like to go next? Tell us about you, third thought.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to the conversation. It's always good to have a round table. I'm Harriet. I work for Third Fort. My role at Third Fort is AML enablement. Before joining Third Fort, I held different roles in-house. So quite a unique perspective that I can bring to Third For. And in regards to Third For, we are a UK-based platform that helps regulated businesses verify, identify source of funds, conduct AML checks, with the aim against protecting against fraud and money laundering, and really improving the client onboarding experience more generally. And we do that in many different ways, but one of our uniques is to bring together different data suppliers under one umbrella where people might not have the ability to connect with them all individually. And we like to bring the best in class data suppliers within the Third For output, so that hopefully clients can access the most accurate and reliable data that they can.
Sweet, thank you. That was succinct. And Third For specialist in law, property, doing really well in that front. So, Leonie, talk to us about you and Seymour and what you guys are up to.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to meet some of the panelists I haven't already met. My name's Leonie Tabor. I'm Head of Risk and Compliance at CIMA. We are a global KYC, KYB tool with end-to-end capabilities, including screening, risk assessment. Our USP is that we are engaging in the digital wallet space, digital EID space. So we're developing product capability in that area. My background is in banking compliance, so I have a vast amount of experience with different screening tools and calibrating and tuning those, and all the hidden difficulties that can arise, which you don't anticipate when you're sitting in the seat as head of compliance of a bank. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Tracy, would you like to tell us about you and your company?
Sure. Thank you very much, Aslin. So I am Tracy Longbottom, co-founder and head of sales at Foresight. We are a relatively new entrant into the UK legal space. So we predominantly, or exclusively actually at the moment, service UK law firms. Really, we're positioned as a risk management platform. Underpinning that is a really robust client matter risk assessment process, but really we are AI driven. So we collate data, screening data is one portion of what we do to help decision making on risk much more easy. So thank you ever so much. Great group of people. Thanks for being invited.
No problem. And Amy, tell us about you, Flagrite, and everything about that.
Thanks, and thanks for inviting me. My name's Amy Cleal. I'm the Commercial Director for UK and Europe based out of London. We do operate globally though, and our customers include UniCredit, Go Cardless and Intuit. Flagrite is a financial crime operating system which enables no-code transaction monitoring, watchlist screening, customer risk assessment, and we also support our customers streamline investigations through our AI native centralized case management module.
Great. Thank you all. So as you can see, we have a very good range of people, range of experience and different industries being sold to. It's really important for this panel to get a diverse cluster of providers. So we have Flagrite covering transaction monitoring, actually monitoring the payments, counterparty screening. Diligencia, I believe, provides a really good kind of a coverage for really hard jurisdictions and provides that KYB screening. Know Your Customer provides the exact accuracy of the direct registry data, so you could always rely on that. And then you have platformers like OmniTrack, like Seymour, like Foresight, and Zenu that bring all of that together and house it into one area. So I'd like to kind of go through some kind of big headline topics that have been bothering me and give me the reason to set this up. I'm personally finding that the old databases, the Dow Jones of the world, the Experience, and the companies that tap into them are missing out on a lot of data, particularly risk data, that is either on the web, or it's in court records, or it's in different languages, or that it goes past 20-year limits. And some of these companies have 10-year limits on their data range. So with that being said, has anybody else noticed this? And when procuring data from your sides, what were you looking for originally? Were you looking at Comply Advantage, Dow Jones, Experian? What were you looking for? And anyone could just go for it, basically.
Aslan, I'll start. I'll remove ourselves from this particular topic of conversation because we're in the business of going directly to official registries and official sources of content, or government sources of content, chambers of commerce, official gazettes, the registries. So we're not reliant on any of the major vendors or aggregators as a source of content, which we would then put back into a screening tool, for example. So we're about originating content from what I call the official sources, and we can discuss that later, I'm sure. But in that respect, I'm not sure I'm best placed to answer your specific question.
I mean, I could come in quickly on just as I said in my intro, my experience of compared probably almost most of the major tools on the market, LexisNexis, RiskScreen, World Compliance, and actually delved into, and this is exactly what I meant in my intro, actually delved into the data feeds, where they come from, Factiva, Dow Jones, whatever list they're using, how far whether they are doing web scraping or data scraping from websites, which gives you a much less detailed and rigorous search parameter to draw from, whether they license content from media suppliers. And there's a vast range, you're right, Arsalan, in terms of what they do and how far they go back. I think as end users, we think that they are conclusive, and they're really not. And particularly, I'm at the moment in the Cayman Islands, and I have been for a while, servicing smaller jurisdictions, and local news media was a gap we found when I was working as head of compliance at a local retail bank. They were not tapping in correctly to local news media to get us the information on our customers. So we could be screening against 5 tools, but they weren't catching our market. So I think it is a really pertinent issue. And I think for all of us who are engaged either in plug and play scenarios with different screening tools, or developing our own, or engaging with these providers, it's critical you do the due diligence to understand exactly what's being supplied in terms of licensed content, in terms of how they're obtaining the information, in terms of how far back they're going, which newspapers. And I had schedules about which major newspapers in which jurisdictions are covered, and then you're tuning in calibration on top of that. You know, are you switching on and off different jurisdictions, and why? And of course, if you're an end user, the methodology around that decision making is critical. But I'll let someone else jump in.
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say something, Tracy, and I'll be interested to hear what you think and what Harriet thinks. We're all in kind of the legal space here. But what we're seeing from our law firm, UK legal clients especially, is that they're often taking more than one provider to carry out these checks. So they're feeling that there are specific niches that different providers are giving them. But they're saying it's okay, we can have 3 or 4 different providers to ensure that we're getting the full picture of everything we need to do. And I think that's something that we've seen kind of evolve, especially in the last couple of years. I think previously it was you're going to pick one provider and they'll do everything. And I think now we're seeing that there is room for different providers to be combining together. And so generally in terms of kind of systems, like we have an omni-track system, we have APIs often with 3 or 4 different providers in order to provide the full set of results. Sorry, Tracy, I'll hand back to you now.
No, don't apologise. It's actually very much in line with what I was going to say. I think the screening space has evolved very much like the identity space, in that people thought like there was a catch-all for everything, and even that's quite nuanced now. So I often speak to firms that might use like InfoTrack for property, and they might use another vendor like Third Fort for corporate, as an example, and they're quite selective in the needs not only of the underlying data provider, but what the layer on top of that offers. So if you look at somebody like a Zapier and a legal, and probably many others on here, they will use Comply Advantage as their underlying source, and will probably have one. And I think probably 5 years ago, law firms were just taking for granted that would be a catch-all, that would do everything. And actually in previous roles, I was constantly taking calls to say, well, you missed this PEP, or you missed this adverse media check. And we're like, well, it's a scaling issue for us as tech vendors, because we can't be all things to all people. You know, it's the 80-20 rule. We can capture most things and we can do most things, but we can't be all things to all people. So it's very much in line, actually, with your view on that, is that it's the communication to your client about what you're actually getting for that. And it's a challenging sales message, right? To say, we can get most of them, we're not going to get all of them. And it's, yeah, Klaus is nodding, but that's the reality as a tech scale up. Of you will never, even if you had 9 out of 10 providers, you would not capture everything. And that's the difficulty. To Leonie's point, if you're looking for some niche adverse media in a very niche jurisdiction, it's not going to happen with most of the big tech providers.
I think I would just continue to run with that a little bit and say around we're all responsible as well for keeping, like I said at the start, we have lots of suppliers that come together, and making sure that we stay on top of our suppliers as much as our clients stay on top of us, and making sure that we're asking the right questions of them. And obviously, if we're seeing that noise come up from our clients and consumers, holding our suppliers to account for that as well. And actually, quite quickly, you can outgrow a supplier. As that might sound quite mean, but as a tech startup and been around a little while, you might have had a supplier in at the start, and actually as you grow and evolve and your clients change and that demographic change and that need changes and that regulation expectation changes as well, the need to constantly keep that under review and keep that conversation kind of going and open with them, and thinking about what is it that's not working. And now AI is a real buzz topic and everybody loves AI and things, but actually one of the things that I certainly noticed is that where a supplier is very AI driven and there's no human touch in that train, actually that can cause quite a frustration. So thinking about, is there another supplier on the market who potentially has that AI element to it, but then also has that human touch? And so I think we've got that joint responsibility when we're taking on such an important thing such as screening for our clients, where the risks of missing something is particularly high, to hold ourselves to a high bar of accountability and make sure that we're constantly reviewing and thinking about where it's missing, where it's gaps, and that we're transparent about that as wherever possible with clients, so that they have the opportunity to look at the market and find other things that fit, or we can do the same actually on their behalf. And actually there might be a growth opportunity within one of our platforms where we can leverage something more specific and more unique.
I think I would just follow on, Harriet, from what you've said there. Firstly, to reflect on the initial part of the conversation, we work in collaboration with many of the large data providers that you've mentioned. And from our experience, the clients are typically quite satisfied with the data that they're receiving, but not the level of configurations that can be provided through the platform. So having a solution like ours enables them to, on a no-code basis, configure different screening profiles for different products or geographies, like Leonie was saying. And then secondly, a very limited user interface for investigations. And this obviously causes a lot of manual review, headache, very large false positive rates, etc. And agentic AI is extremely useful for this. However, as Harriet mentioned, it really needs to be monitored with a human in the loop process, and very strict guardrails on what decisions AI agents can take and what they can't take, aligned to that organization's SOPs and risk appetite.
So I think I have to be careful. We're agnostic, as you know, so we don't necessarily have a similar, right, Amy? But I have to be also careful because I'm in Comply Advantage's offices at the moment, and they do nice coffee.
I love that, full disclosure.
But I'm in an enclosed booth, and they can't get at me. So we work with like some of the other colleagues in our same space, Nexus and LSEG and GBG, and these guys resell our solution and our technology. I think the big thing for me is it's easy to have a knock at these data services. They're not a precise science. But to throw poorly collected, poorly maintained identity data that's going to be used for those screenings and then not do anything about it as those constant false positives are happening, that's where I think the AI has some function, has some improvement. We've tried, we've been testing and working on AI for the last couple of years. What we found is we've ended up with 11 distinct agents doing different tasks, 3 of which are adversarial. So 3 of which are kind of the red team fighting against the blue team. And obviously being Xenia, we've given them all personal names and whatever. But what we found in that is we can do some A/B testing across different vendors. So if you're able to orchestrate and actually quickly integrate and almost do a beauty pageant on the range of different data services, it's often the ones that don't necessarily have the big marketing budgets. I'm not saying big marketing budget means an illusory conversion rate, but when you start to see the data conversion in it, you very quickly see those who are more technically driven and aren't necessarily a recognized brand always, but have really spent the time to clean that data, who are a group I met through you, Arsalan, like the guys at Asia Verify, really brilliant data sets, just no one's ever heard of them, right? So whereas everybody's heard of Lexus, but we know, like all the big aggregators, they have an onion of data. It is multi-layered. It is supplied from all different places. Adverse media scares the hell out of me personally, because I think you can get an entry, and media is now adversarial, not just adverse, right? So from 1990s when it was implemented to where we are now, media and mainstream media is affected by social media. That's really scary, because if you've got a court reporter coming out of, putting something on Twitter about results of someone having a bankruptcy, and that gets into mainstream media, how do you get it out? There are no systems to be able to remove it. But yes, so not to have asked the question, gone off on a slight tangent, but what we see from an A/B testing point of view is gives the customer the opportunity to potentially improve their data as well as choose the right service provider.
So to complete the circle, I say some words as well. Even though we are agnostic as well, so we have multiple screening providers plugged in, and it's not usually our position to tell customers. We resell some for smaller customers, and then that's the only choice really for them. But the large customers all have their own ideas. And I wonder really about two things. Like I now got, thanks for ladies' initial responses immediately, that challenge here. It is not that simple actually to make a good choice here. And even to make a choice might not be the right thing. You should probably work with multiple. Because they all say, oh, we're the best in class data. We have the biggest coverage. And these are all interchangeable. So it's kind of hard. I wonder about two things, really. One, what did you see was the effect of this incredible acceleration of the rate of change in sanctions after the Ukraine war started? And it's like now even more so. And what do you see as the impact of AI there? That's also interesting for me. I mean, we use a lot of it. We have our own solutions, and the team uses a lot, and I use a lot. But what does it mean for screening? I'd love to hear a bit more about it. But these two things really, what did the acceleration in sanctions change your choices there? Would be my first thing.
To pick up just quickly on what you just said, Klaus, but also what Johnny said, I think sanctions is one of the easy parts, because the data provided on a static list is pretty comprehensive. But I think we have to remember we're matching two data sets, exactly as Johnny's point, I always say this, your organization's data must be clean in order to be able to match against the list of potential prospects that you're comparing to. And it's matching those two sides that's critical. Adverse for me, exactly as Johnny said, is the difficulty. It is trying to pinpoint accurate adverse that's targeted to your specific considerations as an institution or a platform. I mean, I've looked at and trying to be all things to all men again, to pick up on Johnny's point. Providers that give you kind of environmental fines for various organizations, is that really relevant in our it could be relevant to a very niche subset of our client base, but across the board, is that going to be critical for people to know? It is hard to determine for adverse, and I don't think any of the providers on the market are great at kind of sifting through that data and providing comprehensive coverage, where it can be so unclear what the prospect is and how you match.
If I can just add a comment, sorry, Leonie, completely agree. And back to Ruth's comment about having multiple providers, makes a whole lot of sense. If we're doing a deep enhanced due diligence report on an entity for a client, much better to have false positives than to have false negatives and miss possible flags. The other thing, I think, to Leonie's point, the global sanctions lists are a pretty finite list. We know where they are, we know where they sit, we know what's in them. PEP lists, again, you can look at the FATF recommendations of how you define a PEP, but then it's pretty subjective after that. And adverse media, as you've been saying, there's a whole database. Where do you stop? You move into social media. How historically far do you go back to look at media for adverse flags, etc. Now, within that, I'll just add another little wrinkle. We work, as I mentioned before, in the Middle East very deeply. So a lot of the sources we're looking at are Arabic. Now, we can spell Muhammad in any number of different ways using the Latin character set. There's one proper spelling in Arabic. There's all the media, historical media, there are ownership structures, there's the patriarchal naming system. It plays havoc, certainly with AI engines and OCR and everything else, but it's a wrinkle that causes a lot of problems. Not a lot of problems, it's a challenge we have to overcome.
So how did you overcome that? Sorry, Leonie.
What do you think to matching algorithms? Because I'm sure that's one of your topics to go to for this session. I mean, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna.
No, that's it. I was just saying it'd be a good time to talk about the transposition, all the different types of mechanisms through which foreign names. I say foreign, sorry.
Yeah, that's precisely what I was going to get into. So, a lot of you have international clients or clients who have international clients. Now, James, you guys work in a very kind of a manual region. Is that fair to say, where things aren't digital, right? So to get that KYB data, you're probably sending a man on the ground. Talk to me about how do you guys actually get your clients to verify these individuals through screening, and why you didn't choose the typical databases and you had to create your own?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the challenge starts with the actual availability of data. So, like all of us, we have clients who need to do due diligence on onboarding or periodic refreshes or whatever it might be, or investigations or whatever on a particular entity. It could be, we could start with an organization, so a company, and the people associated with it. So, of course, you have to start with the data. Now, our clients may have got documentation from their customers, which we then have to review, but actually our business model at Diligentia is to ignore anything that the client has provided to our customer, if you see what I mean, and go to the registries, the official gazettes, chambers of commerce, and get the originating document. Given the jurisdictions we work in, it's a very fragmented approach, and it may be very non-digitized. So I can name any number of West African registries that are still paper-based, and there are 4-foot-high lever arch files in rooms, and you have to get the Articles of Association or whatever. North Africa, Egypt, for example, we might have to go to 4 different sources to create just a corporate profile, a standard corporate profile, the like of which you'd get into Companies House. And it may be, as I say, in Arabic, and maybe on a printed document, a PDF, non-digitized. So it's fragmented. There are protectionist jurisdictions where some of the free zones are set up specifically to sort of obfuscate ownership structures for reasons that are culturally sort of normal in those particular jurisdictions. So starting by getting the accurate information, which will be names, ownership structures, and all the rest of it, that's our challenge. Thereafter, having got those, then there's the whole screening process. And just as I alluded to before, there's the transliteration, translation of, for example, Arabic or Farsi, or it could be Portuguese from Angola, Mozambique, whatever, into the Latin character set. And the use of screening tools, be it Comply Advantage, which we use, or LexisNexis or Dow Jones or whatever, can they search through Arabic languages or foreign languages, etc. So that's the challenge. So our particular challenge at Diligentia is surfacing the information. The next step in meeting our clients' requirements is to make sure it's screened properly. And there's a whole load of, AI is fantastic in the sense that it's really, it's the topic we're all talking about. And OCR, has been around for a long time, but there are challenges in how the data that we've got are interpreted and matched against global sanctions lists, PEPs, adverse media, etc.
So just on that, Klaus, you are Hong Kong based, right, and deal with a lot of similar problems over there with names and variations. How are you dealing with that, and how did you originally kind of add screening as a module there? Was it based on client demand, or?
No, we always wanted to integrate that because it's a nice onboarding flow when you can supply the documents, extract the data, then find the structure, then run them through screening. So screening was always plugged in, but not developed by us. We always wanted to, because our customers would not trust a newcomer to that very easily. We always wanted to work with one of the established ones. Now, I do remember one funny fact about this foreign character sets, and that is when we first contracted to integrate Thomson Reuters at the time. This was before Refinitiv, before LSEC. They had 2 files. They had one file, but you literally download them with all the data with all the names, but was only Latin character set. And then they had a second file that just had the foreign character sets, transliterations, and combinations. So you had to look at someone up in two files where you said, oh, this is Li Ka-ching. And if you use the Chinese characters, you need to use that international second data set to even look them up. Now, meanwhile, in WorldCheck 1 and so on, it's all integrated, and they've moved, but you can see the roots. And this is only 10 years. This is only 10 years. The roots of that are kind of new. So when we started, it was difficult in Asia, and it still is challenging because of the dominance of the Latin character set and sanctions. And so the adverse media, especially, often only being published referring to the Latin character set. We have the exact same problems as James has in the Asian countries, may it be China, may it be Thailand. All these have their own transliterations and fun. And now, this is not really strictly what we concentrate on. We deal with it. We deal with it by referring to all of them. And same here, it's important to catch all positives and sometimes false positives rather than missing them. So we do that. But what we concentrate on is building a system that is based on live connections to company registries. Now, James has an additional problem there with his specific area where we are not really active, and we really need to work together, James. We have a lot of good connections in all over the world, especially Asia, Europe, also Americas, where that is possible. And these connections are live. So what we didn't build was a database that just contains last year's or last month's or months ago data. It's always live. So when you ask the system, it goes out then. For us, the main difference or the main interest of why we did this was that it makes no sense for anybody screening here to screen a corporate structure as it was 2 years ago. You need to screen the corporate structure as it is today. Who is director today of that parent company 2 levels up? Not who was when they applied and then continue to screen every day on the same data. And that's the USP that we have in our solution. Because it's always live, you can always look at the current set. That's really our difference here.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for the question. Yeah.
So I want to go to some risk management platforms and then to the verification platforms and then get Zenu's thoughts on everything as well. So when I say risk management, I'm talking more about Foresight and Flagrite here. So one for Flagrite, talk to me about the counterparty screening for your clients, and talk to me about when you were guys building your kind of due diligence and verification, just when a bank is doing due diligence on counterparty or screening, what were the important factors you wanted in there? Was it AI? Was it more depth? Was it more watch list? Kind of talk to me about that module. And then, of course, Tracy, a follow-up for you is, are you guys looking to be like Zenu, agnostic, or would you guys have your own screening overlays or your own AI overlays that can aid your users with figuring out what is going on in this case? So yeah, if Amy, you could answer that first and then Tracy follow up, that'd be great.
So for counterparty screening on payment, our customers are looking at various watch lists like Sanctions and PEPs to understand if the individuals that are receiving the transaction or businesses that are receiving transaction are potentially sanctions or PEPs. So abilities there, include configurable screening builder where you different configurations and logics built out for different markets or different product types or different payment types. And then in the investigation part, we do have AI agents that are specifically enabled to deal with counterparty screening and resolve low risk alerts, which have an extremely high of being a false positive.
If you don't mind me asking there, some of the banks I speak to are always looking for more typology and data on what they're scanning for. So IP address, what phone was used, what were the locations when they were doing an activity or a transaction. Do you guys look at broader due diligence than just screening? And is your AI looking at anything else at the moment, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we talk more broadly about financial crime risk or cross-transaction monitoring, we have a range of typologies that our banking clients and financial services clients are looking at. So these can be things like IP address sharing, device sharing across numerous users, etc., and then highlighting the risks associated with that. So that's a very common methodology that banks are using. Other methodologies include things like, very low deposits, frequency of deposits, for example. And there's a whole host of rules that we have set up out of the box or that can be configured specifically for organizations that look at velocity, anomaly detection. So simply, all our customers typically transact between the hours of 9 and 5 p.m. or business working hours. A client has started, sending high frequency transactions or high value transactions at 3 a.m. That's obviously anomalous behavior. You'll want to automatically block or stop that, suspend it until it's been reviewed by an investigator or an analyst.
Great, thank you. Because what I'm describing here is a screening, not just AML, but the entirety and the broader due diligence that you're doing. And when you're looking at due diligence, Tracy, you guys have created a risk management due diligence platform for legal. The screening is currently done through API. How important is screening when spotting risk for lawyers? And usually it's just hidden in a PDF on somebody's case management system,
well, I was going
right?
to say, you say API quite strongly there, Aslan. We've had to diversify it. No, like quite rightly. That's where we started. The solution has moved on quite significantly then. I think somebody mentioned quite old technology, OCRing earlier, which is still part of our platform. We have our own large language model now as well, which will ingest unstructured data from pretty much anywhere. In terms of your question about are we agnostic, I say we're selectively agnostic. If somebody came to us with what we would perceive to be, and this is not us being subjective, but somebody that we'd never come across in the market, that we hadn't had good credentials or had a good reputation in the market, then we might advise differently. But if it was a well-known player, then absolutely we would ingest and we would help them decipher that data in whatever the most applicable way to do that would be. Now that depends on where the data is coming from. So lots of the technology providers on here will do a lot of the heavy lifting on PEPs and sanctions screening already within their own app, in which case the value that we add is quite thin on that. Some other providers are actually pretty poor at that. It's part of a very small part of what they do, and things like whitelisting is very, very difficult, especially in legal. Harriet's nodding, she knows this. I'm not going to name any names, obviously, but some of the capability to say this is not my client or this is my client, even when you've done the research yourself and you've done the heavy lifting as a person and gone through that, there's no capability to say, yes, this is a false positive or it's a false negative, as James said. So the degree to which we add value to that depends on the source of the data, but we try not to influence our clients really in terms of who their PEPs and sanctions screening person is. We can certainly add value on top of that with AI, but as I said, for a lot of players in the legal industry, that will be done to a certain degree already. Financial services is the same. We don't service financial services at the moment, not to say that we can't, but we're very specific on law firms at the moment.
Makes sense. Now, Harriet, Leonie, and Ruth, talk to me about, you guys are verification providers and you provide the whole suite, right? You're trying to provide KYC, KYB, and screening all together. What does screening mean to you guys, and how much are you investing in the product? You could have a bulk remediation, you could have the best fuzzy match settings, you could add filters to it, you could add AI to it, you could add multiple providers. So where is enough, and where are you guys investing into when it comes to screening?
Can I just quickly jump in on something that Amy said, just to focus, create the cohesion in the conversation, is that I think there's a very different risk proposition for counterparty screening. I think it's very different risk proposition to client screening and what I would call connected parties to clients. And going back to Johnny's point again, to have a tool that does all of that is quite difficult because they are very different. You're looking for different things at each kind of juncture in those different counterparty sets or individual sets. So I think that's probably something important to bear in mind. From our platform, we are always considering that as we embed risk assessment, and we're considering how the screening tool interacts with those risk assessments throughout, because I think it's an ongoing journey of risk assessment activity dovetailing with your screening needs, to create a fully cohesive picture is critical. And I think that's really hard to achieve, but we try.
I think one of the interesting things, and predominantly we service the legal market as well. Like Tracy said, we do work with accountancy firms, we do work with estate agents and letting agents and things like that. But predominantly, I would say our clients are legal, in the legal space. I think the difficulty with some of this conversation for some of our clients is that they don't have the specialist knowledge. So where we're talking about what it needs to do globally to give them the result output that they need, that can be quite challenging for them to kind of get their head around. And I think Amy mentioned it right at the start. When there's configuration options on the table, they can become overwhelming quite quickly. Some of the way that the suppliers for screening work, the options are endless, and there's so many different variations that you can go with that manipulate the output. But ultimately, a lot of our clients just want to know that they are compliant and that they're doing it in the best way for them. But obviously, getting to that end point can be quite hard to navigate. And even when you are in a lot of these conversations, it can be like cutting through a lot of those options and things like that, and working out, well, where have I missed something? Has it missed something? Is it as accurate as I want it to be or need it to be? That's quite a hard game to play, and it's often like a tightrope that you're walking, and it's quite easily to go one way or the other. And I think that's we kind of have to recognize that whilst you guys talk really eloquently about some of these options and the things that you know, and you're in it day to day, for a lot of our clients it's actually quite overwhelming, especially when they're faced with all of those options. But I think we're definitely seeing, and I've certainly seen in this last 12-18 months, this idea that screening isn't just PEPs and sanctions. And I always try and steer the conversation away from and marketing messaging around PEPs and sanctions is the only screening, because it's definitely not. And at one point in time, people were saying, well, why am I seeing this if it's PEPs and sanctions? But it's because it's not PEPs and sanctions screening. The screening is much more holistic than that. And actually, when suppliers have built the data sets that they've got, they're to meet a real broad range of the market. So understanding, like, say, what you need from it or what your clients need from it, that's quite important, so that you can slim it down. But we've definitely seen a move towards this idea, and Amy talked about it really eloquently there, around this idea of intelligent, risk-based, contextual due diligence screening. And actually, within the legal space, I think that we're maybe a little bit behind where Amy talked about being around those additional risk markers, but we're seeing real strong interest in people wanting to see similar levels of risk indicators and risk signals, be that, have I seen this person before? Have they changed the document that they're coming with? Did I reject them before and have they come back? Are they trying different law firms across the area? All of those great insights that actually would affect my output and help me succeed in identifying fraud, money laundering, sanctions risk. Signals are much broader, and I think that's a really important topic that's maybe not quite as talked about. And we do always seem to see people hone in on the word PEP and sanctions, but actually probably both of those wouldn't help us stop like the fraud and the money laundering angle. So again, it depends what you're trying to ultimately do and what you're trying to put out as what you're trying to spot.
I think that's really interesting, Harriet, and I know you've spent many years educating law firms on why this is important, but there does seem to have been a pivotal shift, I think, specifically over the last couple of years, where people are like, anti-money laundering is one element of this. Yeah. There's a much wider risk picture here. Yeah. And one of my frustrations is that people are always like, they lump PEPs and sanctions together, and then they lump adverse media onto that, and they are three very distinct things. Of course, they're interconnected, but they're mutually exclusive of each other as well. So I think that's a really, really interesting point. And the legal industry, some parts of it are waking up, but to your point, some really still need some guidance on what am I even looking at here? What am I looking for? What are the risk indicators?
Yeah, I think Tracy, you're spot on. We work with kind of 30% of the top 100 UK law firms at the moment, and I think there's a massive gap between the larger law firms who have, say, a 10 or 15 person AML team. So often it's kind of the fee earners themselves are just putting in basic data that actually goes to a specialized AML team that are doing all the work, and it's just been kind of signed off at the end by the partner or the relevant fee earner. Whereas you've got on the other end these smaller firms where it might be a partner that's just been thrown on the duties of MLRO, the money laundering officer, and just like, okay, what do I do? Where do I start? And I think that that's part of kind of the conversation you have to have with a prospective client is, do you know what you're doing? Do you not know? Do you need our assistance? Do you need our hand holding? And that's where kind of us as software providers need to understand exactly what level a firm is actually currently operating and understand how much assistance they need. We, as I mentioned, we have some firms that are using 3 or 4 different providers to carry out just even basic kind of adverse media checks, etc. Just really, and they have an analyst sitting there, and their job all day is to just look and compare all of these different data sets. On the other hand, you've got a much smaller firm, which again, third fund, I'm sure you have quite a few of these, where they just want to quickly onboard as soon as they can, so they can get on with sale of a property or whatever else it is they're doing. And I think you really have to carefully see exactly what the needs are of the specific firms or clients.
Before I think the challenge, Ruth, is that a lot of them don't even know their own risk appetite. I heard somebody really succinctly describe this at an event last week, which was like, may not be PEPs or sanctioned, but you might do like childcare work, and then do you want to be representing a sex offender if you're doing childcare work? Like, and it's really incongruous, and it's such an obvious, easy example that you could give to your fee earners, but one that I invariably have never heard. I've been doing this for a very long time now, and last week was like the most succinct way that I'd heard that be presented. They're never going to come up as a sanction. You know, they're not a Russian oligarch, and they're not a politically exposed person in any way, but that is so incongruous with who you would want to be representing that, like, just lumping those things together for screening is wild to me. But I'm sure Harriet sees it all the time in her training as well.
So guys, just on that, so when I was speaking to a few banks, they gave me a typology list of 300 kind of factors of Phoenix companies, shell companies, repeat registrations, and all of these other stuff that is about somebody's identity, behavior, or company patterns on company's house, and where they're involved. For instance, has Arslan registered in the same dodgy address that thousands of Chinese are registering today? And how legitimate is that address? So if that is the future of screening, and Harriet and Amy, as you're rightly pointing out, then is it not true that the databases that we're speaking of, the old databases, are not designed to spot risk in today's world? They're designed to spot risk in 10, 20 years ago, when it was those tag-based and people wouldn't change their business name. I'll just give you one example. I tried to find somebody's screening records, give it to 10 prominent providers that probably some of you use here. They could not find it because the name of the individual changed, and he changed his business name every year. That's it. And it was 20 years ago. So it was just out of date. And then major banks and major financial institutions cannot spot that risk because it's not on a PEP, sanctions, or classic adverse media. You have to browse the web completely to find other data points. So how do you guys feel about that? And is that what you're looking to build to service your financial service clients or your legal clients?
So I think, I mean, we have a pretty broad range of customers. Sounds like everyone else does too. You know, we onboard contractors at NASA through to, you know, we do work with the World Bank to do seed funds, not VC funds, actual funding for seeds to put in the ground in Burma. So it's quite wide and varied. And identity, as we've all discussed quite ad nauseum, is local. And we're trying to say here is a global panacea. It doesn't work. We've got two situations from KYB point of view, right, Klaus? The European business activity and the European business wallet is going to take away a lot of the basic registration challenges that we currently have. And then it's going to be attestation of that wallet and other further data to enrich it. We were quite surprised. We tried about 3 months ago, we put a new agent into a client, and it did the searches and it enriched with LinkedIn information or certain other social media information or content. And it was so much more used or so much more utilized than we ever anticipated, because it wasn't the database of record. It wasn't sitting there coming from the Refinitives database, which has been there for years and is very well respected. So I think those things are, and other risk signals are certainly stronger. I think the challenge, and to Tracy's point, is there's a lot of organizations now who didn't grow up with regulatory compliance. They have been disrupted by compliance and regulation rather than having a choice. And they look at regulation as, we look at it, it gets you on the starting grid. For them, it's the finish line. And therein lies the challenge. Where is this risk modeling going to go? We've been trying to build, and I don't know, probably you guys have done something similar in terms of how do we model the existing risk matrix that customer has agreed and set, and then put it through an AI tool to say, well, if we rejig that and made recommendations on it, where does that leave those thresholds, and how much percentage would have actually been straight through processing, and how much would have actually gone for manual review and case management? And it can be, depending on those signals, it can be pretty aggressive. You suddenly going, actually, the geography is now a factor, the device IP is now a factor, and these other things are drawn into it. It makes it a lot more complicated. And let's be honest, outside the identity bubble, where we all sit and where we all talk about this complexity because it's the day we leave. I'm going through a purchase of a property at the moment. My solicitor asked me to bring in my passport and if I could fax my contract. I said, I can't fax it from here. Like, where do you live? Well, 2026, So the reality is somewhat different for these smaller organizations. I think we can make it more user-friendly. I think with AI, as long as it's an overlay, and AI is in the deck rather than core in the data, where we're starting to really change some underlying factors of it, we can give these users the tools where they're not going to have to think about it too hard. But in doing so, for those AML curious organizations rather than AML expert organizations, that poses an even greater risk because they've now created a black box by using AI. And we all do this to some extent. Well, it came out of ChatGPT, it must be true,
So for you guys,
there's
Johnny,
the risk.
Johnny, because I don't think a lot of people know what Zeno does. So would you mind giving me a very quick, I mean, I can do it, but you guys orchestrate. So you guys are actually like a marketplace, aren't you?
Yeah, so we have a no-code orchestration platform, and we've been doing that for about the last 10 years. We started similar to you, Klaus, with the Experian and TransUnion out in APAC, and then moved across to the US and around the world. So we have an orchestration tool, which we have a fast integration agent, so we can bring in people's APIs relatively quickly, SDKs for identity schemes, and obviously KYB, range of different services and opportunities to do so. Built-in dynamics.
Johnny, just because we're short on time, we have 9 minutes. So I'm just going to breeze through to everybody else. Guys, just on the question of, are you adding more to your screening? And how do you feel about the fact that a lot of the risk data sits outside PEP Sanctions, Adverse Media? What are you guys doing about that?
I think it's an amazing time that we live in at the moment. There's more data available than ever before, but it's an arms race. Both sides, the fraudsters, the money launderers, and we on the good side are fighting to keep the upper hand. Both sides have to race here. And I think the important bit is that, yes, use all the latest technologies, use all the latest data sources. But I think in respect to data, and Johnny will agree here, or like that's what I learned from you as well. The clean data is the underlying everything, the right decisions is the battleground at the moment, because there's so much data coming in from so many sources with AI that is multiplied, but the reliability and where it's actually from, that is the question on most of us. So to find the right combination of suppliers and contracting and so on that gives you that total reliability, I think is one of the key battlegrounds in this arms race, just from my side.
I completely agree. I think, sorry, just very briefly, the advent of AI means obviously automation, speeding things up, removal of some of the manual stuff. I would suggest that AI and technology is used to do the low risk stuff really well and really fast, and always escalate the high risk stuff to people. I mean, call me old fashioned. But I think that's kind of where it's going. I would say for Johnny, with your property transaction, you need to speak to Third Fort.
Noted.
Just to add to that, also kind of the legal sector is that 100% these AI tools should be integrated and utilized, with the big caveat, though, that the SRA at least expect you to have everything documented and human to have reviewed it and to actually have a human decision making rather than it being an automated decision making. So 100% these tools should help speed things up and kind of onboard clients, prospects as soon as possible, but make sure everything is documented and make sure you've got the ongoing monitoring piece documented as well to ensure that you've got a trail should you be audited to avoid any fines in the future.
I would continue that as well. So to answer your question, I think all of us, if you're working in a tech company, are definitely talking about AI in the future and what utopia might look like in 5, 10, 15 years. Like, I mean, you can't even really dream it in some ways. Like I do always say, like, if I'd have asked my mum and dad where we would have been today, I don't think they would have predicted that technology would have advanced in the way it maybe has. And so planning for such a far place in time it is quite tricky, but we've all got ideas of what we think might be possible. And I certainly work with a bunch of really intelligent engineers who've got brains much smarter than my own, I'm sure. And they are very excited about the prospect of what AI can bring. But we also have to, with my risk and compliance hat and my legal hat on, we're always balancing that with obviously consumer safety, protection. Obviously, we are working with really sensitive data a lot of the time. And we have to remember there's a human that belongs to as well in this process. But we're also working with clients. And as Ruth alluded to, transparency is kind of key, particularly with our legal clients. They're maybe not as far forward as much as they like to think they are with the tech journey. They are quite hesitant as well about the risks that AI brings to their journey, whilst they are excited a little bit, but I would say they're more hesitant about actually what does this expose us to, what does this open up to, and actually how does that work and interplay with us. And so transparency is a real key. And so we're currently having a lot of conversations around how do we balance the excitement and the things that AI can bring and the prospects, because they are endless. But actually then how do we bring that to market in a safe manner, but also in a manner that our clients would appreciate, as well as the regulators above them. Although we have seen appetite from the SRA that they are interested in AI. They are very forward thinking in some ways around AI, and obviously allowing an AI-based law firm to operate and give advice as well, but with the strict guidelines around the quality, the assurance piece, and the reliability piece. So there was a big test piece that had to go accompanying it to show that you could put that trust in it.
Cool. And then Leonie, you guys are building a digital wallet. So what we're talking about with trust and clean data going in.
And trying to get to grips with the EU rules around that and what that looks like is tricky. And I think there's some lack of clarity, across the board around that. And it may well, it will be the gold standard of kind of identity, and therefore the screening and the approach to due diligence around that will need to be of the same critical standards. I just want to pick up on something Ruth said. I think is very important, is that you can have all the tech solutions, but if the user interface and the record keeping side of it is not right, you will fall foul of regulatory scrutiny. So I think not forgetting that piece and the human decision making and the rationale around the decision making at the end is critical, because you can't just point at the tool and say, well, it spat out that, therefore I'm happy. So
that, Leonie, but sadly not.
yeah. So I think that's something I'm always holding the flag for within our organisation versus the tech guys, to kind of bring it back to reality and say, no, we need to have the ability to do that. So I would just wave the flag for that. Sorry, go on, Tracy.
No, I was saying, yeah, most law firms would love that. I've been in a commercial negotiation this week where they wanted us to take full liability for whatever the AI said. I might have to walk away from this one, sadly.
So just a quick question for Amy here and Tracy. Again, back to what we were saying. What are your last comments on? Actually, for Amy, I think it's quite different to what we're saying, because I'm not necessarily asking the question of AI here. What I'm saying is the further data, the typologies that we speak of are no longer just needs of banks. They're also the needs of law firms, as Harriet said. So how are we doing with adding these typologies to our databases, to our screening, to give our users more data? But then on the other hand, right, law firms don't want to pay for more, right? they're happy with their adverse media. A penny more will cause a whole scene. So, Amy, talk to me about these typologies, what your futures are with AI, and what you're doing as well there.
So I think just to reiterate what most people on the call have already said, human in the loop and a risk-based approach here are critical. And that applies across monitoring, screening, and investigations, and in all these verticals. I'm definitely not an expert in law, so I can't speak to that specific use case, but I'd love to perhaps follow up with conversations with Harriet and others on the call, Tracy, who are working with law firms, about how they could potentially use services like flag rights monitoring capabilities outside the core screening, sanctions, and PEP risk in order to, detect financial crime, whether that be fraud or AML. But for us, it's really going to be about continuing to streamline financial crime operating within banks, gaming companies, and payment companies. It's about reducing friction and streamlining investigations, as I mentioned. But critically, as everyone has already said in this call, it can't be a black box. And, the AI agents, the human in the loop element, and the guardrails have to be in place to ensure that there's a natural language narrative which can be easily audited by internal audited regulator and others. And we're already at time. Tracy, go ahead. Sorry.
No, don't worry. I just saw the time and I've got a commercial meeting. I would love to connect to them separately. Thank you so much, Arslan. I was very well entrenched in that conversation then. Thank you. I will chat to you all soon. Take care, guys. Bye.
Arslan, you're muted.
Oh, apologies for that. I was going on a whole story about something. No, I'm joking. Let's have a kind of a 1-minute outro. Leave your lasting comments. I'm not in a rush necessarily to close this off. It's 2 hours. We're going for 2 hours now. But yeah, feel free to take your time to make a closing statement about your business and the topic of today.
I'll just give an anecdote, if I may. I've been in this business a long time, and post 9/11, of course, there was a whole raft of new regulations to do with KYC, AML, or counterterrorism financing, etc. And I was in the financial services space, dealing with large banks. The compliance officers were being asked to do so much more with so less resource. They were always chasing their tails. It very much became a box-ticking exercise. Maybe it's just because I'm older, but things seem to have really changed. The whole AML, KYC, screening, risk-based process is very much realer now than I think it's ever been because of the disrupted world we live in. The stuff we are dealing with now is real stuff. And so the advent of fantastic tools like AI and everything else is wonderful in creating efficiencies and all the rest of it. But you've got to have this human oversight of this thing before the thing runs away with you. And I'm going back to accuracy of original data, really understanding ownership structures, all that kind of stuff. So AI and all the rest, technology, fantastic tools. But I think we're living in such a world where it's real screening in context is so appropriate. So it isn't just PEP, sanctions, and adverse media. It's much bigger than that. It's about complex routing of payments. It's about different changes of behavior of a particular company, all that sort of stuff. So it's a very interesting space to be in at the minute.
Well, and we hope, as you say, James, that there isn't amongst executives a fall back to the position of stripping resources, because although we're all here to provide, assistance and support to compliance functions in different industries and in different ways, it's the criminals are only growing more adept at evading these sorts of screening. So the resourcing must be there to combat that. Otherwise, we will fail.
I probably would. We are failing, right? At the moment, the criminals are winning. However hard we try, we're following regulations, whereas we need to be following risk and fraud. We probably need to work together more. I think there's a lot of disruptive businesses that are coming in, to your point, Arslan, who are potentially uprooting that traditional big database structure about this is the Bible according to KYB, and I think there are some very confused customers out there. Certainly, we come across them who are either victim of marketing hyperbole, which we all have. Most of us have marketing departments whose job it is to try and tell the best version of our truth. But I think there needs to be more conversations like this, where they're surfacing the strengths and the weaknesses, and the fact that what we do is local, it is by use case, and it is not a global panacea as much as we'd love it to be. The technology is getting better day by day that we can do those things and be multi-jurisdictional. But at the end of the day, humanity is separated by language, it's separated by geography, and it's separated by regulations. And until the technology can bridge all those gaps, we're still going to have some pretty complex business requirements across these operational compliance teams. And I think the fact that you've brought together some businesses here that address that is great. And hopefully the people watching and listening to this have had some insights and some transparency and some honesty from us of where it does work. We've just got a long, long way to go to even think about catching up, because criminals don't have procurement teams. They don't have structured, legal requirements to be able to get across. They don't have the EU AI Act looming down on them, right? They just do what they want. And we've got to find ways of fighting better at that.
Yeah, and I think it's also, everyone needs to just remember ultimately that compliance isn't a tick box exercise, because as you said, the fraudsters will find ways to get through those tick box exercises, and you really need to make sure you've got like a truly risk-based end-to-end process, and have the confidence to go and feel confident that what you have can be audited, and you feel comfortable in order to come knocking on your door.
Yeah, I think I would say, I might work for Third Fort, but you would never hear me say out loud that Third Fort's the only option. And I think it's just that honesty that, like, there isn't a single right model, there isn't a single right approach, and it's going to be different for everybody. And it's sometimes saying that out loud to people, and they might think, oh, well, I'm only here to sell myself, and I'm not, because I work in compliance, I work in risk and compliance, and I have for a long time, because I want to do the right thing, and I want us to actually make a difference. To your point, Johnny, I want us to eventually win that battle, and I'd like to see that within my career, for us to be on the other side of that conversation and be in a much more powerful, dominant position where we can have confidence to say, actually, we are making the difference that we dreamed that we would make in this conversation today. And sometimes for businesses, we're not the right fit, and one of you guys might be the right fit in that conversation, and that's the right thing to do, and that's the right thing to say. And I would much rather stand behind that and be authentic than sell people a dream and actually they don't get it. And I've been in the other seat where I've been in the firm and people have sold me the stars and the moons, and I've started using the product and I'm like, this doesn't do what you told me it do, and you feel missold to, you feel mistreated in that conversation. And I definitely would never want to put myself in that position of being in a supplier where that's the case. But one of the things I wrote when you put the little bullet points together and sent them before the session was moving away from data collection to satisfying, like moving away from actually just collecting documents to satisfy compliance, to actually connecting data and understanding risk. And for me, that's the important thing. And just saying about ticking boxes, but in a different way.
From my viewpoint here, I get away from this from this little panel here and this discussion actually more positive. Yes, the challenges multiply. Yes, the complexities grow and all, but here are people who actually know what you're doing, where we're all concentrated and focused on the right side. And I think that accounts for a lot. And I think together and as an industry in our various different functions, and yes, it's never just one solution that's the perfect fit. We're actually moving stuff here and we're making the world better. I'd rather keep on that side and not despair of the challenges.
I'd say one thing. Sorry, just Amy. That's one thing. You make that point. I wish marketing teams would stop claiming to have coverage of more people that actually have addresses in the world. You know, I think this is not fair on the market.
And more countries than there are countries in the world. 250 countries.
I know AI slop is good for marketing, but we need to be ready. We have to look at ourselves to some extent too. Apologies, Amy. I just did a typical bloke thing and interrupted. So my apologies.
Don't worry at all. Thanks, Johnny. I think just to reflect on what everyone's summarized, that's what ultimately we probably all love about working in this space, in this community, is that to Harriet's point, not only do we want to not sell or promote products that won't solve companies' operational needs, but also ultimately we're solving real world problems here. So at the end of the day, we're hopefully preventing, fraud victims and, not and detecting serious criminal networks. And I just hope that, the enhancements that we're continuing to make to our product and, that everyone else in the room is to theirs will enable our customers to move from not just reacting to financial crime, but actually preventing it and starting to win the battle against, fraudsters and criminals, but also focus their attention on, real suspicious activity rather than repetitive, monotonous alerts.
Here.
Thank you all. Here, as you said. Just a quick overview of everybody here. Johnny Davis from Xenu orchestration platform. They have hundreds of tools in their marketplace. You just select whatever you want, put it together, and create a client onboarding tool that is tailored to you. Klaus, CEO of Know Your Customer, global coverage, direct registry access to the toughest jurisdictions in the world, especially the APAC region. Now, I know a lot of law firms that struggle with actually verifying who are these companies. Do they have ties with the Chinese government? Yes, probably they do. And then we have Omni. You can definitely help them. And then we have VinciWorks, and they have a fantastic S-tier tool for law firms. I've seen it, love it. Very comprehensive and covers everything from KYC. Has a bunch of KYC providers. I think Thirdford is one of your providers, Credus, and a bunch of others.
They are, yeah.
There you go. So, and then Diligencia saw it recently, loved it. They make the job of sending a man on the ground to Africa, grab the KYB document, read, translate, and give you that data similar to Know Your Customer, superbly useful for those regions. And then Thirdford, the leading provider when it comes to property, legal, identity verification, solid tool. I've gone against them, and it was difficult trying to remove clients from them. Leonie Tabor from Seymour, they're building a slick digital wallet tool, a full client onboarding tool for digital wallet. If that works out, I really hope it does, because that will save all of our lives from having to re-verify every single time. And then Amy from Flagrite, really slick tool. Probably, I've said this to Amy, and I'll say it again loud here. Probably the slickest interface when it comes to UX, UI, how data dynamically moves from one area to another. Highly urge you guys to look at the way it was built. Thank you guys so much. Pleasure doing this with you all, and hopefully we can do another one soon.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you all.
Thanks, guys.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.